And what feels like more and more as a must-win for the Ducks against USC, these are the guys that have to play well to do it.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, and part of the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much for making that the case. Keys to victory, thoughts on Jordon Davison. Is he about to go wild? And I'll have my score prediction on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So, first guy that I thought of when pondering, all right, which individuals have to step up? And I'm kind of channeling the energy from my individual standout segment here of beyond the obvious. Like, yeah, Dante Moore can't turn the ball over 2 or 3 times like he did against Indiana, obviously. But honestly, even if I went to the obvious, I think one of the most important Ducks in this game is Jadon Canady. Jadon Canady is Oregon's primary nickel this year. They've used some other guys, Dalen Austin and Sione Laulea. I've seen some action there. Laulea's been banged up, but Canady's been the go-to guy there, and he's been really good. He has been one of the biggest surprises to me on Oregon's defense in pleasant fashion. Of course, he's played exceptionally well. I think you are going to see a lot of Jadon Canady matching up with Makai Lemon. However often Oregon runs man-to-man coverage, I think Lincoln Riley, when you look at what he does with Makai Lemon, their best receiver, who's already got 1,000 yards on the year, and I've talked about a bunch throughout the week, when you look at what he does with Lemon in that offense, he's almost never just lining him up and having him run routes. He will line up just behind the offensive line. He'll be in the backfield. He'll go in motion. They will do anything to get him a free, clean release. And he's almost never lining up out wide from what I see. He does a lot of work from the slot. So if you're thinking going into this game, well, Brandon Finney will shut him down. Finney doesn't play in the slot. He's playing one of the outside corner spots. So Makai Lemon can be a safety blanket. He can be a bailout. He can be a go-to guy. He can borderline, obviously Jayden Maiava throws the ball well. He can carry an offense. That's the sort of receiver Makai Lemon has been. Go look at their game against Illinois. They lost because their defense couldn't get a stop late. They were almost exclusively just throwing the ball to number 6. They were, by the way, Marcus Mariota is the game day guest picker. I'm stoked about that. But they can run their offense through Makai Lemon, make him a focal point. Whether you know it's coming or not, he can just go out there and make the plays. I would love, once Dacorian Moore gets back from injury and gets fully integrated, either this year or next year, for Oregon's offense to be able to do that, because he has that sort of potential as well. But I think the corner that he's going to go one-on-one with the most, however often that happens, Oregon ran a bunch of man coverage last week. Maybe they go more zone to help Canady out because Lemon is so good, but I think he's going to have a huge, huge role in this game. 2 other guys, Amari Washington and Bear Alexander. This will play into one of my keys later when I talk about him in the second segment. But the interior of this USC offensive line, I think, has been weaker than the tackles. We'll see how healthy they are up there and whether or not they get guys back on the defensive side of the ball as well. But USC's offensive line, which as I talked about on yesterday's show, isn't highly thought of in the eyes of Pro Football Focus, and I don't think it's a great unit. I don't think it's nearly as bad as the grades indicate. I think it's kind of average. I think on the interior, they are much more gettable. And Bear Alexander and Amari Washington, especially Bear Alexander, going against his old team, I think those guys could be in for a big day. And with the way USC runs the ball with that counter action, if they can be disruptive, I mean, your edge players getting downhill quickly can disrupt counter before the guys can pull into the hole and kick out to create the lane. But if those guys can be disruptive up front, I think that can do a lot of great things for Oregon's defense in this game. So that's a matchup that I'm really curious to see, and those guys will be important. Speaking of individual matchups, the USC defensive line, again, doesn't grade super highly. I think is all right. I don't think they're as good as the offensive line, but one guy who stands out, a way that I always think about it is which guys on USC's offense or defense would start for this Ducks roster, who I think we can all agree is really good and really talented on both sides of the ball. Kamari Ramsey at safety, he'd probably start over Aaron Flowers. I don't think he'd start over Dylan Thieneman, and I love Aaron Flowers, but that's a guy. Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, especially with where Oregon's receiver room is currently at, those guys would start for the Ducks. Another guy who would have a chance, I don't know if he'd start, but I think he'd be a heavy rotation guy, is Anthony Lucas. Former 5-star recruit, was at Texas A&M. I think he was a part of that number one, historic recruiting class for Texas A&M once upon a time, or one of those classes. He went to USC, either last year or the year before. He is the best edge rusher that USC has. I think he's the best pure pass rusher that USC has. Him against Isaiah World, which is primarily where Lucas plays, they don't shift him around a lot. Tuioti and Uyunglele for Oregon will play on both ends of the line of scrimmage. Lucas almost exclusively, from what I've seen, goes against the left tackle, and I think that's when he's been at his best. That's going to be a matchup. You talk about protecting Dante Moore. Yes, the interior of the offensive line obviously matters. I feel really good about that group. Iuli played his best game of the year last week against Minnesota at the left guard spot. We know Prenon is great. Another USC transfer up there. Poncho's elite. And then the right tackle spot. Hopefully Janoris Wilson is there for depth, but I feel good about Alex Harkey. But Isaiah World, who's been good this year, I would not say great, against Anthony Lucas, that's a huge matchup. If Oregon's passing game is going to have success the way it did last week against Minnesota, Isaiah World has to hold up when he's one-on-one with Anthony Lucas. And then the last one, and then this goes back to the chess match that is going to be really fascinating to watch in this matchup. Jacoby Lane, unlike Mekhi Lemon, their other great receiver, he's not going to line up in the slot basically ever. He's almost exclusively going on the outside. I'm sure Lincoln Riley and his staff will see what all of us have seen as well, which is Brandon Finney is playing at an All-American level, and the other corner spot has been riding the hot hand and has frankly had some ups and downs. In the last couple weeks, both Ife Obadegwu and Theron Johnson, who have been the other starting corner, they've been just okay. I don't think they've been horrible. At times they've been not great, but they've also had some really good moments too. I think one of those guys is going to have to play well against Jacoby Lane. But when USC wants to throw those fade shots inside the red zone, I think they are going to attack the non-Brandon Finney side of things. And one of those guys, and by the way, it's not limited to the red zone where he's effective. Going up and down the field, these are the two guys that Jayden Maiava wants to throw the ball to. They don't really use their tight ends until they get into the red zone consistently. One of those guys, whether it's Iffy or Theron or both, I'm sure both will play. That's the way it's been all season long. They're going to have to play well because I think you could see Jayden Maiava dropping back and just picking on that side of the field and saying, no, let's just not even mess around with Brandon Finney wherever he is. Let's throw in the other direction. And then, of course, how does Oregon counter? Do they roll a safety over the top? Do they try to get more pressure? Because Lane does a lot of downfield work, not as much in the short yardage situation. So I think those are going to be the most important players. Jaden Canady, Amari Washington and Bear Alexander, Isaiah World, and either, but probably both, of Ife Obadegwu and Theron Johnson. If those guys, if they all play well, Oregon's going to be just fine. If, what do I have, 6 players there? If 3 of them play well, I think they have a good chance. If only one of them's playing well, Oregon could have a problem. So let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. Drop your score predictions, all that good stuff. I've got keys beyond, and these players might come up again in the second segment, but keys to Oregon getting a win and staying in control of its playoff fate against the Trojans. First, this episode brought to you by Game Time. College football is the best. We all love it. Tailgates, the rivalries. Oregon's got 2 upcoming to end the regular season. The energy in the stands, there's nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why you want to use Game Time, just like I do. It's the way that you are going to get tickets easiest to literally anything that you want. What you see is what you pay. Best prices, no surprise fees, last minute tickets. They've got you covered. I'm going to see Oregon basketball play Auburn on Monday in Vegas. My brother and I are going to the game. Super stoked. Got my tickets on Game Time. Why? Because the process is easy. I see the total up front. I'm saving money compared to other ticketing services. It's got everything that you're looking for there. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. We've got our second segment sip, which means it is time to talk about the keys to victory. So, number one key, and these are in order. Sometimes I make my keys to the game and say, yeah, in any particular order, but that's when it's not a big game. Couple things I'm looking for in this order. Number one, Oregon has to disrupt the timing and rhythm of Jayden Maiava. So, he's been really good this year. He has become far less turnover prone than he was when he took over the starting job for Miller Moss last season and has done a much better job throwing the football. He's mobile-ish. Dante Moore, I think, is a better athlete. We know Dante Moore is not exactly Bo Nix out there or Anthony Brown running the football as a quarterback, but he's certainly capable. Jayden Maiava, like Dante Moore, again, I don't think he's as fast. He's not quite as nimble, but he can move. He can do more than enough. They'll have a couple design, either quarterback runs or plays where he can keep it on the read option throughout the course of the game. But I think in the passing game is where he's the most dangerous, particularly getting the ball down the field to Jacoby Lane and Makai Lemon. So disrupting his rhythm and timing with quarterback pressure, I think does two things. Number one, makes any quarterback uncomfortable, especially on the road where USC has struggled this season. And in their two road losses, and they also had a road game at Nebraska that was tough. They struggled offensively in that one, but their defense has actually had a tougher time on the road overall than the offense has. But the best way to disrupt any quarterback is not to have your secondary play incredibly well, and they can only really play as well as the defensive line is and the linebackers and their ability to get pressure on the quarterback. So, the guys I highlighted earlier, Amari Washington and Bear Alexander, they haven't been, I'd say, super active rushing the quarterback at all times this year. Most interior defensive linemen aren't. It just doesn't set up that way as often because you're going against a double team way more than a guy coming off the edge, because one of you is going to go against that center guard combo unless you're bringing five or more as a part of your blitz package. But Maiava, like most quarterbacks, struggles when he is under pressure. But there are two aspects to why I have this as my number one key. First of all, it makes it hard for any quarterback to play, and he's a huge part of what they do. But secondly, I'm okay with completions to Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane as long as they're not explosives. And if you're disrupting the timing and the rhythm and the flow of the USC offense when he's sitting in the pocket, he's not going to have time to push the ball down the field, and Lincoln Riley will have to make an adjustment. If Makai Lemon finishes the game with 10 catches for 92 yards, that's a win for the Ducks. Because that means on average, his first downs or his receptions are not going for first downs. Where you run into a problem is if Makai Lemon has 11 for 140 yards or something like that. But if you force everything to be underneath and make USC kind of dink and dunk down the field and not let them get easy ones and make them earn everything, I think Oregon's advantage up front can show through to the point where you'll be able to keep USC out of the end zone and off the scoreboard as much as you were looking for. So that is easily my number one key to the game. You have to disrupt his rhythm and timing. It doesn't necessarily have to result in sacks, or there's not a sack number that I'm looking for in this game. What I'll be watching for is how comfortable is he in the pocket? Does he get any happy feet? And does he have time to sit back there and try to push the ball down the field to his elite receiver tandem? So taking those away, I think, is more likely to come with quarterback pressure than it is, even though Oregon secondary's played great and Finney is awesome and Thieneman's a stud and all of that is true. When you have great receivers on the other side, sometimes there's just nothing that you can do. You can be in great position, and a guy might just make a play. These receivers are that caliber. I think it's the best tandem Oregon has seen this year, and I'm not throwing shade at Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper at Indiana, because those guys are really good. But if you ask me which tandem I'd rather have, by just a little, I'd go with Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane. So disrupting the timing of Jayden Maiava and getting him under pressure could lead to a turnover, but most importantly, I think he'll just kind of take them out of the rhythm of what they want to do on offense. They run a decent number of extra man protection schemes, whether that's a tight end or a running back, to try to give him time. I'm curious to see how Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi try and counteract that on the other side. Key number 2 is establish the run game early. It can be really demoralizing for a team defensively that has had, let's say, its ups and downs in that area, which is putting it politely for the Trojans fans. They've been better than last year. They set a low bar, but they have improved. But as I mentioned earlier this week on the show, they've allowed 170 or more in 3 straight games. If you lean on this run game early, not only can Oregon have success and set up Dante Moore for what he's able to do in the passing game really well, but I think you can just wear down this USC defense. The interior of the defensive line, like the O-line, I don't think is as good as they are on the perimeter. And if you get Emmanuel Prenon and Poncho and Iuli and the counter actions and whatnot, really creating lanes for these Oregon running backs, I think you could see some explosive runs, which is kind of what we've come to expect from the Oregon ground game, because the way that they have used the 3 running backs of Whittington and De'Aaron Hill and Jordon Davison, of course, who I'll talk about later on today's show as well. You get those guys going early, they just look so fresh throughout the entire game. I love the 3-man rotation. I think that they could have some really big runs, and it could just also serve as a way to help your defense out. Give them a break, let them sit on the sideline, and make Jayden Maiava and Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane and King Miller, their running back, just watch the game from the sideline. So that's key number 2. And then key number 3 is win the money downs. I did not limit this to third down, because in a game like this, probably the biggest of the Lincoln Riley era, one of the biggest of the Dan Lanning era as well, playoff implications going both ways. Both teams, I think, have to. I know USC has to win, and I'm fairly certain Oregon has to win in order to make the college football playoff. When you're in a game like that, you're not holding back. You're going to roll the dice, and we'll see how aggressive Dan Lanning ultimately wants to be. I'll throw this out there now. In any game, frankly, early on, I'm a fan of taking points. But at some point, third down always matters in a big game like this, sustaining drives, momentum, and all that. But in a game like this, I think you're going to have some fourth down attempts going each way. And the number of times that it can come down to who converts in those spots and who doesn't. Heck, it could be an early conversion. I could see this being a game where USC tries to convert on, let's say, 4th and goal from the 2 or 3 yard line. Oregon holds, and then Oregon goes on to win the game by 10 to 14 points or so. And you look back and say, or maybe even more than that, and you look back at that moment and go, wow, that didn't just keep points off the board, but that momentum just swung things in Oregon's favor in a big way, or vice versa. But of course, hopefully not. So disrupt Jayden Maiava's timing, establish the run game early, win the money downs. Those are my 3 keys to victory for the Ducks. If they do 2 of those things, I feel good. If they do 1, could be tight. They do 0, They do all 3, I think Saturday is going to be a really, really fun day. So drop your keys in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think. I've got my score prediction and some thoughts on Jordon Davison coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. The Blazers did that in the fourth quarter, and then it all fell apart. It's not going well. But something I have noticed, a lot of folks in the national media space are bullish on Oregon covering the 9.5 point spread. That's what the line is sitting at right now, according to FanDuel as I'm recording this show. Maybe it'll swell to 10.5 if everyone keeps talking up the Ducks. That's a lot of points. Oregon's also capable of scoring a lot of points. So if you think the Ducks are just going to steamroll USC, Oregon minus 9.5 is what you think. If you think Oregon is in a tricky spot, that USC's offense will have success going up and down the field, maybe you want to take the Trojans in the points and hedge your happiness. Whatever you want, do it at FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel's giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Wrapping today's show, I'll start with my score prediction: Oregon 34, USC 24. I think this will be a pretty sweaty game for most of it. I think the Ducks' rushing attack will wind up being too much. I expect them to be able to get over 200 on the ground. If they can't, then Dante Moore is going to have to show up with what will likely again be a limited receiving core. We'll see if Gary Bryant Jr., another former USC Trojan, plays, or if he has to lean on Kenyon Sadiq a whole heck of a lot, like I talked about yesterday on the show. But I think Oregon's got enough to win in this spot, and USC's definitely improved. I don't think there's a 0% chance whatsoever. As I'm recording this segment, I'm feeling more and more anxious about the game, but I believe in Dan Lanning and the staff's ability with an extra day of rest at home to win this game 34-24. Hit on the keys I talked about earlier, and Oregon will be all right. One of my Locked On Ducks insiders out there sent this one in. So I have an SSA. I follow most of the Ducks on Instagram, and it looks like Evan Stewart has updated his Instagram page. I noticed it about a week ago or so to Oregon football, green heart incoming. This is all God. So that being said, SSA, Evan gets some reps this Saturday against USC. Thanks, as always, Spain Duck Ben. Look at that. Locked On Ducks International. Love to hear that. I'd be pleasantly surprised if Evan Stewart plays at all. It's not what anybody's really expecting, so I'm at a 2. I mean, it's not impossible, because what I've been told is there's a plan or a sense for him to play at some point this year. It'd probably be for a playoff game, but would it feel at all out of the realm of possibility for Dan Lanning to have controlled the narrative enough to have that be where everyone is thinking and what we're all talking about with regards to Evan Stewart, and then all of a sudden he shows up on Saturday? Does that feel like something Lanning would never do? Not to me. Not to me in any way, shape, or form. So I give that one a 2, but that's why it's not a 1. Tobias sends this one in. SSA, when Jordon Davison's time at Oregon is done, the Duck community will speak about him in the same sentence as LaMichael James, Kenyon, J. Stu, Rolls-Royce, etc. A top 5, if not a top 3 Oregon running back of all time. I've put him on Legend Watch. So before I give you my take on that SSA, let me say in this game, Jordon Davison could have another big outing. Why? Because I think he can have a big day against anyone. No matter the style of game that's being played, he is just looking better and better as this season has gone on. If he were to one day ascend into truly legendary status, this could be the game that we look back and go, that was the real marker. Sure, he had some big games. Last week against Minnesota, he was awesome, and he ran well against Penn State, and the Wisconsin game was ugly, but it's not big like this. Game day's in town. It's USC. There's a playoff spot on the line. If he goes crazy in this game, it would be a feather in his cap for Oregon fans to be able to think this way. Now, the guys you throw out there, because, man, Gary Campbell for the longest time was such a good running backs coach and developed and recruited so many good ones. And there have been, this position has just been a revolving door of elite guys. I mean, you didn't even mention, because unfortunately his career at Oregon ended with an injury, Thomas Tyner, who I was always a big fan of. And how often does a 5-star recruit come from the state of Oregon? Answer, not very often. So could he get to the same sentence as LaMichael, Kenyon, J. Stu, Rolls-Royce? Well, you named 4 great ones there. A top 5, if not a top 3. I don't know which of those guys. I don't put DeAnthony in this discussion, by the way, because DeAnthony's position was football player, not just pure running back. So, man, for me growing up, I remember J. Stu plenty. Terrence Whitehead, Jeremiah Johnson, all really good. That's kind of who Davison reminds me of. Maybe a little Jeremiah Johnson action with him. But man, the guys that the era of football that made me fall in love with the Ducks, I've said for a long time, LaMichael's my favorite Duck of all time. That'll never change. And Kenyon was, of course, right there with him. Jay Stu, legend, top 5. That's a tough one. I might want to come back and answer this again after the USC game and see if he pops the way that I think he could. But man, a top 5, that's such a hard list to crack. Let me put that at a 4.5. So I'm just slightly on the side of not quite 50-50. Don't think it's a ridiculous take by any stretch because I love Davison. But man, the lineup of all-time Oregon great running backs is outrageously good. So I've got Oregon 34-24, whether it's Davison or Dyer Hill or Whittington or all three, get the ground game going. And hopefully Oregon goes out and makes a statement. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.